Hello again. This is the third module of Media Content Industries. It's the module on media industries. And in particular, we'll be discussing the music industry, and we're going to start off with music production and consumption. To start off with, we're going to visit an artist called Richie Houghton. We'll be going back to Richie a couple of times. I just wanted to give you a little taste of the type of things, some of the things that he does, and some of the technologies that he uses. So what we're going to look at first of all is really the production and the evolution of tools. So what we've had over the past 15 to 20 years is a significant shift from hardware production to software, and then onto software as a service. And what this has involved is a shift from physical hardware and installed software, so digital audio workstation software, towards software as a service. And down in the bottom left-hand corner is a tool called Audio Tool. So it's a purely browser-based digital audio workstation. And what this enabled is, for you to basically do almost everything just purely from your desktop. Well, we think about the evolution of production within music, and I'll focus particularly on electronic music. We moved away from needing to be in a particular studio and using a range of different hardware synths and samplers, all kinds of things, towards just being able to do it all on the one machine and in a browser. And indeed, now we're moving towards being able to achieve much of that on the iPads that you all have, and or on phones also. So let's have a think about. So this is some. It's a timeline of some of the developments in three key areas. And so one is really the technology, and under that technology, so in the first column, it's really looking at hardware and software. The second is looking at hacking and cracking and the evolution of peer-to-peer, and in the third column is enforcement and protection. So in 1983, we had MIDI invented. In 1985, we had the file transfer protocol, which that was released. In the 1990s, we had a lot of digital audio workstation software. So Steinberg's Cubase is a sequencer. It was available on all three computer platforms in 1991. In 1999, Napster brought peer-to-peer exchange to the masses with a peak of 50 million registered users. In 2000, we had Propellerhead's Reason 1 released, and Brian Cohen developed the BitTorrent protocol in 2001. And we had, in 2001, the Grokster peer-to-peer exchange network established. So in 2002, we had Pro Tools evolve with both, it was software and hardware, which were kind of combined together. With the Digo 2 and the Mbox. In 2004, the Pirate Bay BitTorrent was established. In 2005, we had Reason 3, and by November 2006, Reason 3 had been downloaded from Demonoid.com, a popular file peer-to-peer software, peer-to-peer exchange network. In that year, also the Grokster judgment closed Grokster. One of the interesting things about the close of Grokster was that when that was closed, it was then released as an open source set of instructions, which effectively meant that anyone with that little bit of code could just replicate a basic peer-to-peer exchange network. In 2006, Ableton Live was released, in 2006, not long after the release, Live 6 appeared on Demonoid.com, and it had been downloaded a number of times, 5,000 times, By 2007, BitTorrent was said to account for 60% of internet traffic, and Audio Tool was developed and released. So, and when we think about it, some of those numbers that were relatively small, Napster had 50 million users. So in 2012, Spotify had 20 million subscribers with 5 million paid in 2012. By 2015, Spotify had 60 million subscribers and 15 million paid by January 2015. So what are some of the implications for creativity of those changes? Right. So at one level, we had enormous access to tools, and that included templates, including access to how-to tools. Basically, when I and almost everyone else want to learn something practical, quite often our first step is to see what YouTube videos there are available. And Meikle and Young suggest that the real gap between doing nothing and doing something, is that's the really big difference. And one of the things that they point to is the LOL Cats, right? So part of what LOL Cats does is it says, well, I'm doing this very simple, silly thing, and you can do that too. And so part of the technologies that we have around us, and part of the affordances of the technologies of creativity, is to give us kind of the permission to be able to say, okay, well, you can do this too.
This is pretty much the standard setup when I'm playing at a club or a festival right now. You've got the Allen & Heath 62 or 92 in the middle for the mixer, and then two Allen & Heath 1D controllers, which are doing all my MIDI controlling of my computers. And of course, the two computers, one running some extra effects, and my main computer running Traktor with 4 decks and all the features we're going to talk about today. So how exactly is all this set up? The right side of the 1D is basically split into 4 channels, deck A, B, C, D. I've got a way to turn on loops here, on and off. I've got effects level and effects parameters. A second row of parameters, which changes depending on what effect I'm using. And this row here is connected to this loop on and off below, and here at the top, the length of the loops. So what was important for me is to have as much control over each deck as possible. On the left side, we've got another 1D controller, which some of the top parameters are controlling my effects computer. And then the bottom parameters here, these are super important. This is deck A, B, C, D. So if I want to scan through tracks, if I want to load tracks, this is a very quick way to do it. And I also have a lot of these parameters are also on the computer. So there's usually 2 ways to do everything, which is not only good for me, but it's really boring sometimes just using one way of doing things. And also I think about the people out there. If they're looking at me and I'm always just doing this, maybe that's also boring. So I'm trying to do it so I'm using this 1D, that 1D. Sometimes I'm on the computer, sometimes I'm on another computer. And it's more of a, part of the entertainment of a DJ is the physicality of it. And everybody thinks this is interesting. But to me, this is also interesting in a different way. Actually, one of the best features for me right now, which is probably one of the features that scares a lot of people, and there's a little bit of controversy about, is that I'm letting Traktor now sync my tracks. I take some time before the gig to make sure the beat maps are done, but once I'm playing, I'm really allowing the computer to make sure those things stay in time. And some people say that's not DJing, but for me it's opened up a whole new world of possibilities, because now I can focus my attention on the looping, the changing the size, taking things out of time and bringing them back when I want, and also using the effects from whatever kind of effects I want. So in Traktor right now I have a beat masher in here, and I have my 1D controlling each of the turntables, allowing me to bring in that effect whenever I want. and I can change it on the fly. And of course, you can do that to multiple decks at a time. And it's always nice to, in my opinion, do things that go off time and get a bit fucked up. So that's really easy. These are, again, always controlling certain parameters for each effect, whether I'm on a beat matcher or if I'm in one of the internal reverbs or flangers, and it's really quick access. And again, it's that's the thing. You can't look at allowing the computer to do one thing is only boring if you don't use the time that the computer saves you to do something else. And that's why I'm using this.
I think that's really interesting. Because that's just given us a real insight into the way Richie Horton sets up the technologies, the kind of audio, the channels that he's using, the kind of effects, and the way he uses that in a way was incredibly misty in the past, right? So that was what a lot of DJs and musicians, that was kind of the magic, right? It was all kind of secret. And I think what Richie Horton in particular is trying to do is to try to demystify that, because in his words, he's saying, well, I set my things up like this in particular ways, and I want other people to use that Richie Horton setup and then do something else really amazing with it. Right? And I think that kind of marks this really fundamental shift in terms of how music creativity has been taking place. So now I'd like to shift a little bit into a discussion of some of the gatekeepers. So when we think about the gatekeepers in the music industry, there are some really significant gatekeepers, and I wanted to focus in particular on one, and that's the record labels, and the contribution of record labels to music is incredibly significant, right? So for during the times of scarcity, they were really critical, and I think they're still critical in terms of bringing and supporting and nurturing musicians and bringing that music to the masses, right? Us as the mass when we think about mass communication. And record labels, what they've done is they've really dealt with scarcity in a number of different ways. And at one level, it's the scarcity of resources, right? So a record label, and the Steve Albini paper that that was a key reading and that we'll pull apart in the next session or in the next part, is a bit of a look at that. And what they did, in part is they provided funds to, record and press, let's say a record or a CD. They provided resources for exposure, to go on tour, all of these kind of things, right? And that was a really critical role. To a very large extent, Shirky suggests that gatekeeping principle comes from that broadcast paradigm that we spoke of previously, where you need to filter all of the content first, you pick out the gems, and then you publish those. Now, Mikkel and Young suggest that this is now being turned on its head, right? Now we publish, and then the filtering kind of comes out of that, right? The filtering comes after that, and then we have a whole number of filters that operate, and the other core reading that I set kind of talks about the importance of some of those filters.